How's it going, everybody? We're going to let people funnel in a little bit, and we'll get started here very soon. If you have any questions, comments, anything that you want us to cover, please do so in the chat, which I'm trying to pull up right now. Izzy should be monitoring the chat too. I'll be presenting some slides here, so I might not be on top of it, but Izzy and Robbie should be able to get to your questions.
For sure. By the way, I'm super excited for today's stuff, Nate. I don't think the people know that there's going to be a stupid amount of value in today's stuff. So for those that show up, you're going to be getting a blessing from Nate and some really cool stuff here.
I agree, and if you don't show up, that's fine. If you're listening to it later,
that is not fine.
Yeah, you have to be here. We'll share this stuff, the slides, and a recording with you guys afterwards as well. And we're finally getting caught up on the ISA Radio podcast. So if you're not subscribed to that, make sure you go to theisaradio.com, get subscribed. All of our webinars here are released as podcasts as well, if that's your preferred method of listening. But I think we're ready to get things started, so I'll kick things off. Welcome to everyone who's joining us today for our second episode of the Automated ISA series. My name is Nate. I am the CEO and co-founder of Structurally. We're an artificial intelligence inside sales agent company, and as always, I have Robbie T with me.
I'm here. I made it.
Yeah, and Robbie is with Hatch Coaching. For those of you who don't know and who haven't heard of him yet, you will, not only here, but Robbie is kind of well known and making some splashes across the industry for his lead conversion tactics, which we're going to share some of those, which we're really excited about today. So today we're going to be talking about how to automate messaging to turn have-not Mets into Mets. So if some of you aren't familiar with some of this terminology, basically it's pretty straightforward. A have-not met is someone, a lead prospect, someone that you have not met with in some shape or form. A met is obviously someone who you've met with and who's probably more than willing to take the next step, or you have a next step with them to potentially follow up with later. So really kind of working these leads through the funnel, and we're going to be explaining some ways to do that in more of an automated fashion. I'm going to go through this, see if I can present it. 1 second.
Perfect.
There we go.
That fanciness.
Yeah, so I'll kind of set the stage here. We're going to break things into 4 categories. Obviously, the theme is turning have-not Mets into Mets, but we're going to kind of walk you through that entire funnel. It's going to be turning unresponsive leads into responsive, responsive leads into prospective, prospective into committed, committed into clients. So if you couldn't follow that, that's fine. We'll tell you when we're switching gears kind of throughout these 4 sections. But again, we're going to start with unresponsive to responsive, and we're going to let Robbie kind of kick us off there.
Awesome. Yeah. So I mean, here's the biggest thing, right? Is most of the people that are on this webinar, everyone that's joining with us, the reality is that when I look at people's CRMs, the biggest problem I see is almost everybody has leads sitting in lead purgatory. And basically what I mean by that is they are stuck in the unresponsive stage and nothing is happening with it. And there's a couple of different ways, right? If you know my history of being an ISA where I started, the first stage of chasing leads like that was dials. And as you all know, the game is changing. If you haven't heard, dials are dying. It's just what's happening, that the numbers are going down. And we've completely pivoted, I shouldn't say pivoted, we've diversified our strategy to not just include dials, dials, and dials. Instead, we're also automating a lot of our initial messaging with the whole goal of stimulating a response. And Nate, you said stage one is going from unresponsive to responsive. The simplest thing I can tell you that we're consistently doing is we are using a different buyer and seller campaigns. We'll talk about a few different ones here in a moment, but we're using different campaigns and different tactics to try and elicit a response. So let's just talk about this real quick. Whether it's the buyer or the seller lead, obviously we are using different campaigns for different lead sources. For example, like a Zillow campaign or a Realtor.com campaign or a forced registration campaign or a home evaluation campaign. And really all that's changing with those automated messages that are going out on behalf of our companies is you're just changing that first few messages to really properly identify maybe where they came from. The way you approach a Zillow lead is going to be a little bit different because the way they interacted with you is going to be a little bit different as opposed to a forced registration lead. But long story short, what's happening is this. And if you got questions about this, all that fun stuff, shoot me a message and ask. But basically over 14 days, what's happening is a lead is receiving 30 automated touches over those 14 days. And the majority of those, about 2/3, are text messages. And a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, don't people just tell you to screw off? Yes, some do. And I'm sure Nate can tell you that no matter what, some people are going to do that. The whole point is for us to elicit some form of response. And I'll tell you this, when I've studied the best lead converters out there, when I've studied the best ISAs, the people that are converting leads at the highest level, they do one thing really well. They don't care about getting no's, they get excited about them. Because what that does is it allows you to take those leads, put them in a pile, and by the way, please write this down. Don't ever, ever, ever delete leads. Please never do that. But what it allows you to do is put them in a pile. That way you don't have to give them any more energy and effort. Because the reality is that our most precious resource among all of us, I don't care if you're an ISA, agent, rainmaker, Bill Gates, Oprah Winfrey, doesn't matter. Your most precious resource is your time. And really what these messaging plans are meant to do is to elicit a response. And almost always that first response is at least some form of indication of whether they're thinking about making a move or not sometime in the future. And for those that are no's, of course, we'll maybe ask one or two more questions, but we're going to take those people, put them in a pile, and not necessarily, we're going to ignore them for a time being. And those that are interested, we're going to invest and pour time into those people. And we're going to do our best from that point to make sure that we're trying to convert them from unresponsive to responsive now, all the way down to being a client. Now,
Yeah.
you want to add anything to that?
No, I think for those of you listening, this might be pretty basic to start, but it's really just getting in the mindset of what we're talking about today is moving have not mets into mets. That's a slim few leads that are going to make it through that entire funnel. Yeah. And it's okay if someone doesn't go from have not met to met, in 30 days. That's okay. It's going to take plans like these over time to get them there, but it's important that you understand what these plans are and how to segment them and where to apply them.
And then to kind of just give a little more depth behind the automation, the reality is there's a couple different strategies that we've used in creating those 30 different touches. The biggest thing I'll tell you is that we are using GIFs at a high level, and GIFs get really great response rates compared to an average text message. And usually that GIF is just tied to whatever the theme of the message is. And there's some funny ones. One of my favorite that I made, because I'm a Star Wars nerd, is the text is something like, buying or selling can be quite frustrating. Is there anything that we could do to help take the frustration out of the process? And the funny part is the GIF is of Chewbacca slamming a guitar into a bar stool. And he's just going ham, right? And the funny thing is, I think GIFs, what they're doing is they elicit emotion, and people are a lot more likely to respond. And the big thing is this: is with your messages, is you want to do your best to come across as human. And then the other thing we're doing is we're intentionally doing things like a 6-minute delay, where you send a message and then 6 minutes later it sends another message because it seems remarkably human. And as Nate's circling right there, you can see the response rates are ridiculous. And actually, to kind of go through that real quick, the first text right there, number 1, if you want to circle that one, that's still interested in learning more about that home, that's just a regular text message, very base, regular, and the response rate's only 12%. And then if you look at that 6-minute text, so literally all it's doing is sending something like, let me know if you have any questions. 6 minutes later, the response rate is 22%. Now, the next message is the first GIF message. And what is that response rate? Is that 28%, Nate?
28.
28%. Now, the funny thing is this, is that usually what you see is actually the opposite.
Yeah.
You see diminishing returns. Like, that's how messaging plans work, is you get less and less responses because if somebody's likely to respond, they're more likely to do up front.
Yep.
So to see it do the inverse of that just shows how powerful, using some psychological hacks like a 6-minute text as well as GIFs, what they can do to really increase your contact rate.
Yeah, those are some pretty crazy numbers. Is this relatively similar? What's the second one?
Yeah, I mean, it's really weird to go from some plans to another one. The first message, if you go back one more slide, that is a inquiry plan. So these are leads that have inquired about specific property.
Okay.
So they tend to be higher quality. So your response rates just tend to be higher. You're going to convert more. And then your pay-per-click forced registration leads tends to be just lower quality across the board in terms of contact rate. What we found is that the contact rate tends to actually be a little more steady over time with those, for some odd reason I couldn't really tell you.
Yeah, I mean, those are definitely the longer term nurtures. So that's probably where the steadiness comes from. Those property inquiry leads are probably pretty hot heavy up front, since the nature of their inquiry. These guys are probably a little bit more passive over time. So
that 100% agree with that.
Yeah. And so to give some kind of credibility to these messaging campaigns, and I want to caveat this too. We talked about new inquiry leads and PPC leads. They're both new leads.
Yes.
How can people do this with old leads?
Yeah, so you just take honestly the same message plans, and you just change the first message. So instead of it saying, hey, Nate, just got your inquiry, you change it to, hey, Nate, a little while back. And you just change that verbiage. So really all you got to do is you change it from the present tense to the past tense.
Yeah.
And
the reason I want to ask this too, so I'm not pulling this out of left field, the whole thing of this again is to turn have not mets into mets. Those can be new and old leads. There's probably 10,000 people in your database that you have not met. They might be from 5 years ago. They might be from 5 days ago. But it doesn't matter where or when they came from. These principles can still be applied.
Oh yeah, 100%. And the reality is actually there's probably more gold sitting in your old leads, especially when it comes to pay-per-click leads and your new leads. The funny thing is we ran numbers on our average closing date on our pay-per-click leads. These are our pay-per-click closings, and the average number of days it took for a pay-per-click forced registration lead to go from lead creation to lead closing was 650 some days, somewhere right around that number. So almost 2 years later, these people on average are closing from lead creation to closing. Now, what people don't understand about that is, of course, it's an average, right? There are some that are longer than that, much longer. And frankly, the number continues to actually go up because we continue to chase and convert the old stuff. It's usually about once a month or once every other month. One of my ISAs will post about converting a ridiculously old lead that's just been sitting there. AKA, you shouldn't just give up on these leads. So if you can relate to this, if you have leads that are just sitting there in purgatory, you got old leads sitting there, the best thing you can do is devise a plan to take those leads and put them on an automated messaging plan that touches them a few times. And you'll be surprised by how many people just raise their hands and they'll say, yeah, I'm looking to do something. Because it's a numbers game. It's truly, like, at the end of the day, it used to be a numbers game, and it's always been a numbers game. It just used to be dials, dials, dials. Now it's dials and texts and emails, dials, texts, and emails. I'm just putting emails in there for really no reason. But dials and texts for the most part, and a little bit of email. And it's just changing that game a little bit. The only caution I will give you is don't go take 2,000 of your leads and put them on a plan like one of mine and give that all to one person. You will be overwhelmed with the amount of responses, especially if you have a CRM that's quality and sends the messages.
Yeah.
You'll be overwhelmed, and the whole point of stimulating a response is that way you can partake in a conversation. And if you're going to be overwhelmed with that, don't waste your time, don't spend your money, don't do it. So if you have 10,000 leads, break it up into small chunks and work through the chunks. You can always add more. I promise you, you can't take it back once you press send.
What's a good way to segment those old leads? Like in the example of this case study, they sent messages to 1,000 old unresponsive leads. Were some of them 5 years old, 5 months old? Is that the way to segment them?
I think the first thing I'll say is just segment them. Like, whatever you want to do it. When I advise my clients when they're going through this process, when we're coaching, what I usually advise them to do if we're going through, let's say, 10,000 leads, is we try to actually work the higher quality opportunities first. So like the Zillow leads, for example, they got old Zillow leads just sitting there. Let's get to those before we get to the pay-per-clicks. And let's go get through those. So let's say you have 1,000 old Zillow leads just sitting there. We want to work through those 1,000 Zillow leads. And we probably, frankly, I just advise them, like, literally label it group 1 through whatever number. If you have groups of 100 you're doing or groups of 500, I don't care. If you're, in this case, to kind of tell this story, this is one of my friends and coaching clients, Jason, and he took 1,000 old unresponsive leads. And what he did was he took them, he uploaded them into Sierra. We're calling this cleverly the CRM challenge. And what he literally did was he took 1,000 old unresponsive leads. Now, when I advised him, I said, take 500 of them, and I want 500 of them to be within like the last month, give or take. So they're relatively new old responsive leads. And then I said, the other 500, take your old stuff that is older than 1 year. It's been sitting there for a year in purgatory. And what's crazy is they started to work it. They split the 1,000 leads up to 3 different agents. So they're roughly chasing each 300 leads. And I got a message from him saying that his agent converted 7 of those people, like within a week, into not just appointments, a consultation, but they signed buyer representation agreements. So he took the old stuff, and I can't take any credit outside of starting the conversation, right? Because he took it from there, because that's what it does, is it just creates a ton of conversations, and it's on you to partake in that conversation and inspire them to meet with you. And that's what he did. So kudos to him, and now they're scaling that and bringing it to the whole team, and it's really working well. But it will start conversations for you and really it's just creating at-bats and opportunities for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an awesome story, and I think it's a great segue into the rest of this presentation. It's getting those people once responsive to actually holding a conversation, and then, like you said, getting them building their trust to earn that buyer representation contract. So moving on into the now second part of the presentation, once we get responsive leads, we want to turn them into prospects. So there are ways that we found you can automate some of that. Some stats that are really important that we found through Structurally Side is about 46% of leads reply outside of business hours. That's about half.
Here's my shocked face.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have something in place to capture those, you're missing out on half your leads. That's a big opportunity. And leads, I think this is one of the most commonly thrown around stats out there now known is when a lead or a customer or a client has a gripe with an agent, the number one problem they have is responsiveness. It's when they take the time out of their day to actually respond to these great, wonderful, crafted email campaign or text campaigns that you're building. You have to respond back. And we found that it's really great to respond back within about a minute and a half. That might be pretty quick, but around there, you want to keep that on average, your response time back. Responsiveness and speed to responsiveness is extremely important. This can be extremely overwhelming, especially when you send a campaign to 1,000 leads. You're going to be looking at 300 plus responses in a matter of, an hour or two if you're doing all those at once. And those conversations don't end there. They keep going. And you have to create tasks to text your lead back. We're going to go through an example of how Robbie's ISAs at Hatch Realty are doing that. But that's something that's really important too. The last thing that you want to do is not text the lead back that actually responds to you.
Can I hit on that for a moment as well to just kind of reiterate what you're saying, Nate?
Yeah.
When I was in the game, and I still think this is important, is there's the adage of speed to lead. And speed to lead is super crucial because it's like your first attempt, albeit you can automate that now, just like we kind of talked about. But what we're seeing is their speed to lead isn't enough anymore. Now it's becoming speed to response, like you're saying. And again, the game just continues to change. The more people that are texting you back, the reality is if they text you back and you're not responding for 6 hours, goodness, they're going to go somewhere else if they need something.
Yep.
And it creates an unfair burden, I think you could say, on a human being, which is why Structurally's product is genius, because it can handle on a lot of this for you. But the reality is, and we've always said it, right? We talked about this in the ISA radio. The best ISAs know that this job's a lifestyle. Mm-hmm. And that lifestyle means that it wasn't just speed to lead with leads. Now it's speed to lead and speed to response. And that's a lot of burden to carry.
Yeah, it can be, especially when half of the leads are replying outside of business hours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, 100%. Absolutely.
So kind of this next section, we're going to cover on different aspects to using AI, a product like Structurally, as well as Robbie's going to intervene with how his human ISAs are also trying to take this burden on. But we ultimately believe that a combination of both is the winning formula. Mm-hmm. To start, you want to capture the basics when a lead responds. So what you can see here is information that's automatically collected in conversation when Structurally is engaging a lead. So really basic stuff, timeline, financing status, agent status, contingency, readiness, and potentially an appointment. This is one of the last things that anyone in the world likes to do. If you were listening to our automated ISA series episode 1, we talk about how salespeople spend, what was the number? Like 60% or more of their time not selling, aka updating their CRM. That's the last thing that you want to have to worry about, is actually just adding notes to your CRM. So a lot of that is taken care of for you through Structurally when we're holding that conversation. Kind of to touch on one thing that we recommend both from a human and AI perspective is create tasks to follow up on these responsive conversations. What's the old adage? Old adage is finish a task, create a task, or whatever. Complete a task, create a task.
There you go. Complete a task, create a task. Yep.
Yeah. So that's what every salesperson is trained to do. You should never have an outstanding task on a lead. If you accomplish it, you should create a new one. Mm-hmm. And that's partially done for you in the world of Structurally. So we have a product feature called Tasks, very cleverly named. So depending on what the lead says, if they say something like, I want to go see some properties, I'm not approved for a loan, can you send me some properties? We will automatically create tasks and remind you of these throughout the conversation. So that's another way that we can kind of handle that non-selling aspect of actually holding this conversation for you. And then lastly, kind of one thing that we wanted to cover that we've been talking about is from a human perspective, what are things that you can do in your CRM to remind you to hold these conversations? Let's say you've taken the conversation over from Structurally, which you can do, or you've just started the conversation with this lead on your own. Robbie, how are your ISAs staying on top of these 30, 50, 300 text message conversations going on at once? And do you know, what's the number? Like, how many text conversations is one of your ISA handling right now?
It's nonstop. I mean, it's truly just nonstop. I don't even know if there is a number, because it's just, as soon as you end one, it just, what happens is somebody responds to that next message. It really depends. But let's talk about this real quick. This is the risk you run. And this is the biggest thing I'm screaming to anyone that's in lead conversion that will listen to me is, although this texting stuff, you know, it allows us to scale, and I don't have to be voice to voice. It's very risky in the sense that if you accidentally forget to respond to someone, if you accidentally forget to follow up with someone when they fail to text you back, you are going to lose money. Because the reality, and I put it like this, right? All of us are human, and just because we fail to text back once, it doesn't mean that we're not interested. There are many times where Nate has texted me, and I open that thing up on a coaching call, and next thing you know, Nate's got to nudge me that next day. And that's
Robbie's done that to me before.
Yes, 100%. And I've done it to him, right? And really the whole point is this, is that if you're waiting for the lead to text you back, if you're just sending something off and hoping, you're praying that they respond to you, and that's your strategy, you're in a load of hurt, because people will just forget. It's the way it works. So what we did was we created a plan, and what it does, you can see it right there. What it does is it nudges us to check on the status of that lead. And, you know, I'm clever just like you, Nate, and it says check lead status. And really all we're doing is we're checking in when that nudge pops up to see, did we not get a response yet? And do we need to re-nudge them in some way, shape, or form? Because if you don't set these things, and you can set up manual ones, we just created it so we could just click, 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 and keep doing that. But if you're not doing this, what you're going to accidentally do is you're going to send a text to a lead that you're having a great conversation with. You're going to think it's going really well. And then what's going to happen is they're going to forget to text you back. They're going to drive past that open house. They're going to walk in that open house. You're going to buy that home. You're going to remember 6 days later because your brain sucks. You're going to reach out and you're going to be really frustrated when they already bought a home. Mm-hmm. The reality is a lead owes you nothing, and they don't care. Like, if you don't text them back, they'll just move on and go find someone else. That's just how the game works. On to the next. And if they just forget about you, they don't care. That's the name of the game. It's on you to re-stimulate that conversation because your paycheck depends on it. And this is just a simple way. It's pre-built, and it automatically reminds us. Now, let's just say that to-do pops up, and I'm looking at it. I look at the notes, and you know they already responded. We're good to go. I'm just going to check it off and move on. It takes me 0.2 seconds. But at least I have the ease of mind of that person I'm actively engaged in a conversation with. I'm not just letting that thing fall by the wayside.
That's awesome. Yeah, I have not personally seen these before, and I think this is a huge value add to anyone watching this, is that you should be doing this. You should absolutely be doing something like this. If you're not, you can't let these conversations slip through the crack. Yeah. It's just every product does it. It's a stupid thing, but like I even remember I owe Robbie money through Venmo. Venmo automatically reminded me when I didn't pay it because I forgot. It's something as simple as that. It's built in, these loops are built into every product to get you to do things, to take a next step, and you need to build it into your own product, which is your CRM and your follow-up.
And that's just because you're human, man. Like, we're all humans. Our brains aren't that great sometimes. We forget things. It's just how it works. And dude, if you look at our phones, like, it's funny that we still call our phones a phone, by the way. Isn't it an interesting concept? Because it's really more of a computer than a phone. Yeah. But with our phones, there's so much noise. There's so many notifications and many other things that if things don't remind you, they die. Mm-hmm. And that's why these phones have figured out. It's why they created a notification. They've created nudges.
Yeah.
My favorite is Gmail now. When you send a response, 3 days later, if that person hasn't responded, it's automatically putting it back to my inbox saying, does this need follow-up? I think is the exact wording. And dude, that is, I mean, I love it because that has saved me a few times where I sent a message, forgot about it, because that's how my brain works, is once I do something, I check it, move it out of my inbox, I forget about it. And that's what's happening, by the way, in people's CRMs when you're having these conversations. You got to make sure, Google obviously is next level intelligent. You got to create your own method of intelligence. And this checklist just does that for you.
Yeah. If Google's doing it, you should be doing it.
Agreed, 100%.
And kind of one of the last things to wrap up potentially working prospective leads. So I think another word for perspective in this sense, turning responsive into prospective leads, is qualified. We're turning responsive leads into qualified leads that are worth your time kind of right now. And there's a very simple way to do that instructionally that can potentially also be added into your CRM. So we automatically categorize leads based on the following stages. Most of them are pretty straightforward, but if a lead mentions something like, I want to go see this house, I'm not approved for a loan, I'm not working with an agent, they're more or less qualified, or say something to take a next step, we automatically categorize them in agent follow-up. So these are the leads that should be prospects at this point. These are the leads that you should be taking over, jumping into the conversation, and they're now more or less qualified, ready for your follow-up. So this is a quick way that you can just kind of filter your lists. Again, there are some ways that we can get these into your CRMs, working on more ways. But if you're not taking advantage of, AI smart lists like we have instructionally, there's definitely ways that you can segment your lists in your CRM as well, which we're actually about to cover too. Cool. So speaking of that, we're now moving into prospective, aka qualified, into committed leads. And a way to do that, at least a way to automate that, is through a pretty simple but very powerful ABCD follow-up strategy. And Robbie, I'll let you explain what this means.
Yeah, so long story short, the thing I advocate for, and the biggest problem that I ran into when I was an ISA, and it's funny because it's a failure of Jim and myself. What happened was this, just kind of give the background, was we built up our follow-up. So leads that were prospects, we built up our follow-up and nurturers. Everybody uses a different, verbiage, but that basically is a pool of leads that we're wanting to follow up with in the future that we think will convert at some later point. And Jim and I each built up our pool of leads to about 1,200 people, give or take. And as I'm sure a lot of you guys can understand, that is so many freaking people to have in your follow-up pipeline that you're consistently trying to follow up with and touch base with. And what we found was this, is that we needed to, if we wanted to be effective, we needed to make sure that we were organizing, segmenting, and prioritizing all of our follow-ups. And the simplest thing we realized was not all follow-ups are created equal. If you want to write something down, please write it down. Not all follow-ups are created equal, yet we were treating all follow-ups equally. And what I mean by that was, if you have two different follow-ups, let's say I called Nate, and Nate says that he is about a month out, he's looking to get rolling, he's going on a business trip to LA, and he says, Robbie, I really like you because you got a beard, you wear flat bill hats. Give me a call back in 1 week, and I want to have the conversation about, getting the ball rolling. Okay, so that's one. We got Nate, and he's a really hot opportunity, right? And then on the other hand, let's just say we have Andrew. By the way, Andrew is the other co-founder of Structurally, and Andrew's the very passive, right? He's like most leads. He's like, I don't know, I'm thinking about doing something. I'm still in college. I graduate this December, and I might do something maybe next year, the following, but I'm in no hurry, no major rush, haven't done any financing. And you decide this guy is, at least a year out, you're going to follow up 1 year from now. The thing is that sometimes those follow-ups, the follow-up date you schedule can align and pop up on the same day. Just because I called Andrew a year ago and I called Nate 1 week ago, and that follow-up pops up on the same date. Now, here's the biggest problem is all of us, our most limited resources are time. So what happens is this, is we try calling through our whole follow-up list from the top down, and some days you won't get to it all. It's not going to happen. You get busy, people aren't answering, you get sick, whatever the story may be. And what happened was this, is we realized we were accidentally calling Andrews, the people that were a year out, before we were calling Nate back. And we like to jokingly say, and it's not really a joke, sorry, Eric Hatch, but we easily missed out on hundreds of thousands of dollars of commission because I was calling Andrew before I called Nate. So we're like, all right, how do we fix this? And I'm a very simple person. I try to simplify anything as possible and to the common denominator. And what I'll tell you is we just started applying a tag of A, B, C, and D to all of our follow-ups. And really, it just establishes priority of when that thing pops up. Is this the best, hottest opportunity? Do I need to do this right now? Or could I wait a little bit? Because in the case of Nate, if I don't call back right away, I'm screwed. If I call that dude back 1 week later than what I told him, see ya, gone. If I call Andrew back, the dude that was a year out, and I call him back 385 days later instead of 365, the dude doesn't care. It doesn't matter. So what we started to do was we just started doing A, B, C, and D. Those numbers are there to kind of give a rough guideline of when that thing pops up, is this a high quality opportunity or not? By the way, every time we follow up, we don't just call, we call, text, email, and leave a personalized voicemail. So it's really 4 attempts when we make that follow-up. The other thing what we realized was this, is that with our A's, I should probably be willing to invest more time when I make those follow-up calls. And what I mean by that is when you make that follow-up call on that initial custom date that you choose, in the case of Nate 1 week later, what happens a lot of time is Nate doesn't answer. He doesn't respond to my text, doesn't respond to my email, doesn't respond to my voicemail. And what we found was with our A's, we were willing to invest more time. So we created a system where with our A's, if I call you on that date that we agreed to, Nate, and you don't answer, I'm going to start calling you back 2 times per week if you're an A lead. If you're a B lead, I'm going to call you back once per week. If you're a C lead, I'm going to call you back once per month. And if you're a D, I'm going to call you back bi-monthly. And really the whole point is this, is that I'm willing to invest a hell of a lot more of my energy into chasing Nate if he doesn't answer compared to Andrew. Mm-hmm. Why? Because Andrew was a meh opportunity where Nate was a really solid opportunity. And this changed our SARs, man. This is what allows us to put more people in our pipeline and be more effective. And the other thing I'll say is this, is just because someone was an A doesn't mean they're an A forever. You got to make sure you're willing to downgrade something out if they don't ever answer the call when you call them.
No, that's really important. I think that last piece is really important. What would let's go back a step to so we're having a text conversation. We've established a lead as responsive. We're trying to now qualify them. We've applied those automated reminders to make sure that those conversations are staying up to date. How might one of those leads look on your daily list of tasks?
So they are not at all an A, B, C, or D lead.
Okay.
What we do, because we haven't identified them as an A, B, C, or D follow-up yet.
Okay.
What we do is we have a tag, and it's a transition tag. We just call it AT, active text. And that's just basically for every single person that we're actively engaged in that conversation with, that we haven't got to the end point of their A, B, C, or D follow-up opportunity, or they haven't told me to screw off and die, or they haven't said, yeah, I want to do something.
Yeah.
they're on the AT transition tag. And the way we do it is, and I think we're going to show a shot of our dashboard. You can see AT there. Maybe click one more to the right.
Yep.
There you go. So AT is right there. That's just our active text conversation. So every person we're actively texting, and again, we don't want them to stay there, but if we're actively engaged in that conversation, we're texting back and forth, they're going to be on that tag, and they're going to be on that plan we shared earlier.
Could you walk through the rest of these just briefly?
Yeah, no problem. So all leads are all leads. New leads only shows the unworked new leads. And frankly, like if you're doing your job well as a lead converter, that should always be at 0 or close to 0. That's like your to-do list. You come in, if there's stuff on the new leads, you got to work them. YPI, those are YLOPO priority alerts. Long story short, if somebody behaves in a certain way, that's a YLOPO lead. It sends us a notification, it puts a tag on them, and it goes there, and it's essentially like it's a new lead. And we got to go in and see where's this lead at, what do we need to do with it, and we take that tag off. So it's like it's a new lead, essentially. A's are the A's we just talked about. That's our A follow-ups and nurtures. B's, B follow-up and nurtures. HQ is all of our uncontacted, unresponsive, to use the language from earlier, higher quality opportunities. So these are the people that are higher quality, Zillow leads, Realtor.com. Basically, if it's not pay-per-click, forced registration, it's an HQ lead. AT, active text, we just talked about that. C's are C follow-ups. LQ is our lower quality, unresponsive leads, our uncontacted leads. D's are D follow-ups, and then FFU, I know it looks terrible, is just failed follow-up. That's all it is failed follow-up. Really what that just simply is that when people have ghosted you, if they were an A, B, C, or D, or even someone you're actively texting and they've ghosted you hard, we go put them on FFU. And that's the biggest thing that I advocate that's much different than other people. Just because someone's not interested or if they ghost me, that doesn't mean we just delete them or ignore them forever. We don't go put them in some lead purgatory. Rather, on FFU, what we do is we put them on an automated plan that starts to chase all over again. And you don't see it here, but the other thing we do is with our not interested leads, we put them on a not interested plan that basically 6 months after they tell me, no, I'm not interested, says something like, hey, Nate, just wanted to follow up. I know you weren't interested in making a move when we last spoke. Wanted to see if your plans have changed. And I think I've shared on the show before the UPS story where, you never know what someone's going to say when they're like, the stars just align, it's a numbers game, and you unearth someone that needs to sell their house like that.
Yeah, I did not know any of these. These are really useful. And again, these are how Robbie and his ISAs are filtering their lists in CRMs. These tags can also be used to apply specific campaigns, which we covered earlier. So all of these are super important. Obviously, the name of the game here is segmentation, segmentation, and segmentation, and then sending the right message to the right lead at the right time and prioritizing your ISA's time themselves. So
can I also name one more thing about this that's real cool? Is what's great is in a lot of people's worlds, when they walk into the business, they spend so much time focusing on who the hell do I call today? See it all the time. And the reason we organize our leads is that way we can take action, right? And every single lead we have that we want to be actively chasing is on this list. Every single one is somewhere on here. New leads, A's, B's, all of it. And what's really cool is it's simple, but the first thing we get to is the new leads. The first thing we need to get done is the new leads. Then we do the Y priority alerts. Then our A's, then our B's, then the HQ leads. Then we make sure there's nothing outstanding in our active text. Then our C's, then our LQ, then our D's, then our FFU. And then you go back to HQ and LQ and just call through those lists again. So it's just really, because here's the reality is dude, there are days where you just can't get through everything. It's just the reality of it. So when people come in, they're getting the new leads done for sure. The Y priority alerts, which are essentially like new leads, they're reactivated. Then we're getting to our A's. Every single day of the year, I don't care if it's Christmas, I truly don't care. You should be working your new leads and anything that resembles a new lead and your A opportunities if it says you need to do something. End of story. And then, from there down, we prioritize things in chunks. But those things we're doing Christmas Day, you got to get to those new leads. And that's just the logic we live by in our world. But it's from basically left to right is the priority. So FFU gets called a lot less, gets chased a lot less than HQ. And LQ gets called after HQ. Because yes, any rainmaker, hey, I have an hour of time, where do you want me to invest it? They're almost always going to say, do it in the higher quality opportunities as opposed to your pay-per-click opportunities.
No, absolutely. That helps establish this in my mind for sure. So just read this from left to right if you're listening. That's a good way to kind of think of how to prioritize your leads. So now that we've kind of made it through 3/4 of the funnel, I guess we've made it from unresponsive to responsive, responsive to prospective, prospective to committed. We're now on committed to turning someone into a client. And this is a little bit less about automation, and this is a little bit more about sales, service, and psychology. And ultimately, that's kind of what sales comes down to. But there are some ways that you could potentially automate this. One is through the use of Structurally's new script customization, which we're really excited about as a new feature. If you haven't heard of it, let us know. We'll talk about enabling that on your account. But regardless, ultimately what you're doing at this point, you have someone committed, you're ready to go, is you need to sell your unique value proposition. Why should someone choose you over Robbie or over someone else? Why are they going with you? One really unique example that we've started to see, I think this is a trend more or less across all sales, not just real estate, but just in all sales, is can you send someone a quick video about you, about your company, about what you do that sets you apart? There's a way to do that in Structurally script customization is to send a quick link. This is a great example. Hey, did you know that we can get new listings before they hit Zillow? Here's a video about how. And then send a link. So there are ways that you can highlight your value proposition in an automated way through things like script customization and Structurally, as well as through your CRM, or just by manually sending messages that include a video or something personal to highlight your value. There's another kind of more experimental thing that we've been seeing. This is, again, I was talking to Robbie about this a little bit this morning. We definitely see a trend in online businesses where people want to schedule time to meet with you for an onboarding, for a demo, for a call via an automated link. I'm sure everyone has used something of this form, whether it be Calendly or Mixmax or sometimes Gmail. You can click a link, you can schedule a time, all without the back and forth of talking to someone, which can be very annoying. We have seen some people start to actually include these Calendly links or automated calendar links in their messages to try and streamline the process to either an in-office consultation or a phone appointment, or you could even go all the way to a showing or listing appointment, although that may be a little more aggressive. There's a potential opportunity to actually get something on your calendar within an automated fashion, and that can be done through automated Calendly links by sending it through your Structurally script, through your own text messaging, or through your CRM. Do you have anything to add on this, Robbie? I think you've started to see a few people do this.
Yeah, I think this is something, just from my assessment, I think it's going to become more and more commonplace. I think, as with all trends, you'll see this adapted with younger people first that are a lot more tech savvy, and business individuals that want to be a lot more direct. I don't think this is going to appeal to everyone by chance yet, but I do think that this will become more and more the norm. We're using links like this to schedule stuff is becoming more and more normal. So I think that is absolute truth. And I like to jokingly say, like, this is ahead of time, saying if you do this through structure is ahead of the time, but it will become more and more normal, and it's going to get there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and kind of to wrap things up here within this this segment and just in general, finally, I feel like this is a great place to wrap up. Is you finally got someone booked. You finally made it through all 4 stages of getting someone to respond, qualifying them, getting them to commit. Now you actually need them to convert. You need to get them from have not met to met. Robbie, what is it that you're doing with your ISAs to actually get someone to stick on the calendar and go to it?
Yeah, this is the number one thing we learned to increase our show up rate for our appointments. And I'm talking, this thing increased and bumped our show up rate by 20 points. And we were doing a ton of stuff before it. So if you're doing nothing when you book an appointment, this thing's going to change your world. And it's so stupidly simple. Really all we started to do is that when we book an appointment, we started to introduce the lead in a text message to the agent they're going to be meeting with. And you can see it, you can read it right in front of you. And I think we've even talked about it on the show, but it's just simply saying something like, thanks for chatting today, Alex. I've copied Cole, the agent they're going to be meeting with, on this message so you two can chat before our meeting on Monday at 4:30 p.m. Our address is Hatch Realty 4215. It's just the link so they can click on it, right, on Google Maps. And it just says Jim Renfro. And what we found is if you do that, the agent almost always wants to respond, and they should be responding. And if somebody does need to reschedule, you can see it happen in this one where they like, hey, I hate to be that guy, and I just got off the phone with my girlfriend, and we need to change the day. Or what will happen is they'll respond with, hey, super excited, thanks guys, appreciate it. And really what it does is this, I thought as I was reading a book called, was it Persuasion by Robert Cialdini. And this just plays into the psychological term of consistency and commitment. And really what it comes down to is we are literally connecting to the person that they are going to be meeting with. When we were not doing that before, I think it was psychologically easier for someone to just screw someone over and not show up. That rarely happens anymore because we're creating tiny little contacts between them and that agent. So they're not just that mythical creature anymore. It's humanizing that agent that they're going to be meeting with. So this group text was huge for us, and it takes, you can copy and paste, the main basic of it. Of course, you want to change the name and whatever details, but you can have the template saved. You have to manually do this through your cell phone though, because you can't do it through something like Structurally. You can't do it through a CRM because it's basically a 3-way text between you, the lead that you just booked for an appointment, and the agent they're going to be meeting with.
Yep. Unfortunately, most software providers cannot group messages, so this is something that's kind of have to be done manually outside the books, unfortunately, but it's very effective and very worth it.
Super effective.
Yeah. So, yeah. Do you have anything else to add? I think we're approaching an hour, and we have finally made it through all 4 stages, which is really exciting. I guess maybe we should have added a last slide that is like grab a drink or something. We finally handed it off and met with them. But we've kind of made it through the.
I thought you meant for us. I thought you meant we're getting drinks.
Okay. Oh no, not for us. But I mean, it's only like noon.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere, bro.
I guess. But yeah, if you have any questions about anything that we covered today, obviously Structurally is just structurally.com. Hatch Coaching is hatchcoaching.com. Reach out to Robbie too. Robbie, I know you like to give your pitch on where they can reach out to you because sometimes people reach out to your dad.
So if you don't know me, there's a couple things you should do. Number one, search for Robbie, Robby, T on Facebook, Robby space T. If you don't see me, keep typing after the T. My last name is TREF as in Frank, ETHREN. That's why I just go by Robbie T, because my last name sounds like a pharmaceutical drug with all the problems and none of the cash. But the reason I do this and make sure to spell it out is if you add Robert Trefethrin, you're going to get my dad. And my dad drives truck for a living. And he's not going to be equipped to help you with lead conversion. So make sure you're adding me. Shoot me a private Facebook message. Nudge me through there. That's probably one of the easiest ways to get a hold of me. And if you're not a part of the Leads Geeks, LEADS space GEEKS community, go and join. If you want a copy of one of the messaging plans that we kind of talked about earlier, if you want a sample, there's a thread in there. Just search for it. I think there's like 400 comments on it in about a week. I got a lot of work to do there. I'm going to get around to that tomorrow and Thursday. But go drop your email in that thread and you'll get a copy of our messaging plans. Doesn't cost you a thing. So, and if you ever have any questions about systems, nerdy lead conversion crap, that's what I'm here for. I love geeking out about this stuff.
Yeah, and we love having you on. This has been another great episode of our second episode of our automated ISA series. There will be one more, a third 3-part series in about a month or so. Still working on finalizing the topics. If there's something that you want us to cover, let us know. Write in and tell us what to cover. But
please do, because we don't have anything lined up for that yet.
Yeah, we're gonna figure out something great. But these slides will be sent to you as well as a recording of this video. So if you missed anything, want to copy something down, implement, which we hope you do. I think there's a lot of very tangible implementation pieces from this that you can take away and put into your business. Please do so. Let us know how we can help, how Robbie can help. We're here to do that. And as well as subscribe to theisaradio.com. That's where you can listen to this on the podcast. We're going to be releasing quite a few episodes in the next 2 to 3 months. So basically, we're coming down to a new episode a week. These are some that are older that we're catching up on. So if you're not subscribed, please do so. And with that, we're going to head out and let us know if you have any questions.
Thanks, friends. Appreciate you all.
Thank you all. Take care.
Peace.